Today's guest is a game master and a novelist.
Welcome to DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show. Level up your RPG campaigns by filling yourself with stories and knowledge. Explore topics from archaeology to film history to writing to literature and much, much more. This is DiceGeeks.com Tabletop RPG Show.
Welcome to the show. My name is Matt and I am your host. This is the podcast where we learn how to become better game masters and better role players by filling ourselves with stories and knowledge. Now, it is my intention with this show to bring you some amazing RPG writers, creators, and game masters, but I am also striving to bring you guests from outside the RPG arena so we can learn new things that will help inform our gaming. I have had many novelists on the show. I have had some filmmakers on the show. I am working on getting some professors on the show to talk more in depth about literature. I want to talk about archaeology as well. Been in touch with a couple archaeologists. Just the timing hasn't worked out as I'm recording this, but hopefully soon I will be able to interview an archaeologist. I just think history, archaeology, mythology, folklore, as well as role-playing game tips and tricks all will inform our gaming at the table and make us better. Because you know what, guys? This hobby is awesome. And I want to be the best game master that I can be whenever I'm running a game. And if I'm playing a character, I want to be the best player I can be too. Because I know the better I am at either running a game or playing, that means my friends around me are just going to have more and more fun. I have an awesome conversation today, so let's jump in to the interview. My guest today is the author of the Drexel Pierce Mystery Series, as well as a longtime role-playing game master, Patrick Kanouse. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
How were you first introduced to tabletop role-playing games?
I think it was all the way back in 1983 or so at a Walden bookstore in a mall in Terre Haute, Indiana. I stumbled across a game called Traveler starter kit, and it captured my imagination. I took that thing home and opened it up and started creating characters right away. And for people who know Traveler, knows that character creation is a fun little mini game that they have, and just never really looked back for the most part.
Now, sadly, I have never played Traveler. And it sounds like a game that would be right up my alley. And of course, just a couple years ago, I bought one of the original books and read through some of it. Is it true your character could die during the creation process?
In the original series, yes, they made it so, your character died in some naval conflict or perished in the vacuum of space as a scout and didn't live. And so re-roll. So roll up a new one.
Yeah. Now, that was all based on like you were taking risks to gain more advantages in play, right?
That's correct. Yeah. So because of the way they created your character, so you basically serve 4-year terms, and you would get skill levels based off of that. So every time you finished a 4-year term, you debated whether you wanted to improve your skill a little bit more before you started playing, or did you want to take the chance of your character dying in character creation? And so it was that sort of balance of what do I want to do? Because in Traveler, it's actually hard to improve your skills once you've created the character. It's not impossible, but it's substantially more difficult. So yeah, you kind of weighed those odds.
But yeah, that sounds so fascinating to me. Maybe one day here at a convention or something, I'll get to play a game of Traveler or something, or maybe online. Maybe we won't be allowed to have conventions anymore. I don't know. Since we're recording during the lockdown of the pandemic, what was it about Traveler that captured your imagination?
Yeah, science fiction, really. That's always where my mind has always kind of been towards. I love spaceships. I love the vastness of space, the aliens, and it just really enabled me to put the stories in my head and play them out, in interesting ways. And so all those science fiction novels I was reading, I could essentially make it happen with characters I created and kind of live their lives with that. So I think that was really the appeal of it, because the other games I typically played were typically science fiction, Star Frontiers, 23,000 AD, Twilight 2000, and Star Wars and those kinds of things. So
I played a lot of Star Frontiers as well when I was a kid, although I got it out because I still have the books from when I was a kid, and I got it out a few years ago, and I read through some pages, and I was like, we never played by any of these rules at all. Like, what were we even doing? I think we were just pretending to be in the universe a little bit or something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. But it's impressive that you still have the original books. So that's fantastic. So
Yeah, I have quite a few of the stuff that I had when I was a kid. Well, I had Marvel superheroes as well, but I don't have that one anymore. That one got destroyed along the way. But I have Star Frontier still, and even a few years ago, I found my original Dungeons and Dragons characters that I had made when I was like 9 years old to about 13. They were stuck in a book, kind of just like tucked away at my parents' house when we were cleaning out some stuff. After my father passed away, we were cleaning out some stuff, and I found some things of mine in an old closet, and I pulled out this book and I opened it up, and there were my characters, and it was something else.
Wow. It's like instant memories. Like,
oh my gosh. Yeah. Just taken back. And and like I had forgotten about some of those things, but once I looked at them, it just kind of triggered all these memories that I had of creating these characters and things. And I also learned that I was a total cheater. My lowest attribute score was like 16 on most of the characters.
Yeah. You want to be a hero. Yeah.
Yeah. I just rolled a lot of 18s, I guess, when I was making those D&D characters. So that's interesting that you played a lot of science fiction. Now, did you play Dungeons and Dragons as well?
I am a very recent newcomer to Dungeons and Dragons. So no, I did not play Dungeons and Dragons in my youth. But yeah, so I'm brand new to Dungeons and Dragons. I actually started this year playing.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. It's just interesting to see how people come to the hobby through different ways and different games. I think a lot of people assume that, especially if you started playing in the early 80s, you would come to the hobby through Dungeons and Dragons. But it is interesting to hear that you came through it through Traveler.
And I knew about Dungeons and Dragons, where I grew up in Illinois. I didn't really know anyone else that played. Mm-hmm. So I subjected my younger brother. He had to suffer through many an adventure that I crafted for him. So if I had stumbled on other people that were playing Dungeons and Dragons in the early 80s in a small town in Illinois, I probably would have played. But so it was. I kind of was always went to those science fiction shelves, and that's just kind of where I ended up. And I've always playing Dungeons and Dragons now, after playing years upon years of skill-based characters with no levels. It's a fascinating sort of journey into this. Wait a second, there's at level 3 you get all this stuff that doesn't even exist in Traveler. So
no, I also played a lot of the FASA Star Trek system when I was a kid. Yeah, that was a totally different experience for me too, because it was just totally skill based. I had a lot of fun with that game. They are kind of different schools with the leveling as skill based. I think they both have their advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's at least my experience with Dungeons and Dragons today. It's really rewarding to hit that level 3 where you become less squishy, but you start getting some really interesting powers. You get to start making decisions around for a lot of those characters what your orientation is going to be, or whatnot. So it has that kind of real satisfaction around that, and versus some of the skill based where it's kind of cool to increase your skills and whatnot, but you're it's fairly static, at least with Traveler. There's some stuff with the newer Star Wars where there's, buy talents and that kind of stuff, but it's still a very different, because you're doing it all the time versus like just smashing into this kind of level and getting those. So, but yeah, they definitely both have their merits, and I can see the appeal and the popularity of why class systems exist and why skill based systems exist.
I think you started mentioning a little bit. I guess you started being the game master kind of right away. Is that right?
Yes, I've been a game master since day one, and because I introduced myself to the game, so I kind of had to read all those rules and figure it out myself and figure out the story. So I've played very little as a player. I have done some, but yeah, I've been a lifelong game master or referee and Traveler dungeon master. So
when I was introduced to Dungeons & Dragons, I was 9 years old. It was 1982, and the next day I ran my mom through a dungeon. So after playing one time, then I became a dungeon master. But I think sometimes I meet people who get to play a lot, and they'll have like a game master, somebody who kind of runs the game all the time. Sadly, I think sometimes those people then become afraid to run a game. And they're like afraid to be the game master themselves, and I just always kind of discourages me a little bit to hear that somebody is not willing to be the game master.
It's not as hard or as mysterious, I think, as everyone seems to think it is. That are sometimes kind of afraid of it, and I think if you just kind of take the leap, and you get kind of that cold water. It feels cold first, and then it gets comfortable. I think a lot of people actually would be really comfortable and successful at doing it, and it does give you a sort of a different perspective, and you get to play lots of different characters. I mean, if you like being a player character and role playing those aspects, Game Master, you just get to do it a lot more because you get to play all those NPCs and tell the kind of the story that you want to tell, that you've figured out with your players. And yeah, it's definitely not as mysterious or sort of scary as some think it might be, I think, in my opinion. So
I think sometimes there might be some game masters who want it to seem, to have this mystique or something about it, so they can get some kind of attention or satisfaction out of that. But I think it is, it is important to realize that, it's just another part of the game. The consequences of making mistakes and running a bad session are very short-lived in the scheme of things. That if you run, your first session and you think, oh, well, I didn't do a very good job. Well, guess what? Your next one's going to be better because now you have something to kind of base that off of, and you have some experience now behind you.
Yeah, and I think we're our own harshest critics anyways, right? Yeah. So it's, I ran a session last night of a Witcher game, and it's my first time running through the rules and a game session, and and with some new players, and I was like, how did it go? Did you enjoy it? Did you have fun? I'm open to feedback, what have you. And the response overall was enthusiastic. They enjoyed it. They had a good time. I know we made mistakes in some of the rules, but you know what? It didn't stop the fun. And I think that's the key element of it. If everyone's having the fun at the table, it doesn't matter whether you ran the Starfront 2 rules correctly or not. You just had fun and enjoyed the game.
No, I think that's critical too to understand, because I've been playing Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, and I've been running a game now every week for almost 2 years or so, and I've read through the books. I know the rules, but I forget something every time, right? There's just something I forget. There's a new character type. There's a new, there's just something new that happens. Oh, we haven't done horse combat ever before or something for the first time. And it's just like, oh, well, I don't know those rules. Let me, we're going to have to figure those out, or you always just kind of blank out one time and you find yourself rolling a 6-sided when you should have been rolling an 8-sided or something like that. And it's not that big of a deal. I think it's just like, hey, everybody's going to make a mistake here or there, and everybody's tired sometimes and they're going to forget something. I think you're absolutely right with saying that, we're our harshest critics. Now, since you've been, running games for so long, what do you do to prepare for a session or a campaign?
It depends on the particular game and whether I'm running kind of a campaign or a conference game. So but in the end, I think the high level boils down to the same thing. I prepare enough to know the world and the characters that are operating within that, but leave myself enough flexibility to respond to changing situations or what the player characters are doing. So for the Dungeons and Dragons campaign that I got the character creation session in before the lockdown, so I'm hoping to get it going when that lifts again. I created kind of a world that I wanted people to play in. I have a giant map of what this world looks like. I know it's got a Roman theme in terms of one of the empires. I've named the empires. I've defined kind of the magic, and I've popped in a few cities on this giant map and said, okay, yeah, these are some of the major cities. But there's tons of blank space, far more than what it looks like. And when I was having my session 0 with the players, I was like, you're going to help me fill this in. And I have a overarching kind of story, but that'll take however long it takes. And we're going to have lots of sessions in there, and you're going to drive things that you do are going to affect the world. You're going to visit places that we're going to make up on the fly, or I prepare just a little bit beforehand and have a kind of a rough idea, and we'll fill those in. And then for the particular session that we're doing, I usually have some rough notes, a broad outline, major descriptions that I kind of am interested in. I may kind of flesh those out, but not too detailed. And then I think usually about the NPCs the most. Who are they likely to interact with, and what kind of motives do they have? What's their interest? What's their stake in the game? And I kind of chart out then a few beats. Okay, so they're gonna go to the village, and they're going to check into the tavern, and they're going to find out that some people have gone missing. And I'm going to have an NPC that sort of gets them to dive in and start with that. And I'll have sort of the basic clues that they're going to find, but it's kind of sandboxy. They can do kind of what they want, kind of explore the area. And then I know kind of where I want to get them to, and I'll inject NPCs along the way. And that's kind of how I prep. It's I try to keep it light because I want to maintain the flexibility, and 2, I don't want to lock myself in to a particular storyline or to a particular set of events that, as you know, PCs will blow up in any number of ways that are impossible to calculate. And so that's I try to keep my prep to a minimum. When I've read your No Prep Game Master book, and I think one of the things that really resonated with me in that is the entire notion of, if you read a lot or you watch movies or TV shows, you have a bank of stories that you can rely on and kind of pull out and leverage in any number of circumstances. You can reskin them. You can reskin NPCs and whatnot. So that I try to keep it to a minimum.
Well, thank you for reading my book. That's fantastic. I hope it was helpful.
Yeah, it's very good. I really liked it. And you have a lot of really great advice in there. And I think that resonated with me so much because, I live stories from all over the place to create, these adventures. And most people don't really notice it because it's got a slightly different skin on it. Oh, that's a heist movie that I've seen, but they're wearing Roman armor, so of course it's not the same. So
I think that is just something that is kind of overlooked sometimes. Is just that we are made to love stories, and we have stories all around us. We consume stories through obviously television, movies. We consume stories in songs through our family histories from those who came before us, and all kinds of things like that. And it's just we have all of these little bits, and if we kind of expand ourselves and kind of experience some more of those stories, I think it's just all ammunition, for us ready to kind of take something out of our little bag and just throw it down at the table, even at the moment's notice, just because we kind of have it already there, just kind of in our minds and in our memories from either our reading or from whatever we were watching.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I see no reason not to re-leverage. I mean, if they stuck with you, they're probably successful in telling that story and relaying across that information. And it's great fodder for pulling up in a game as you're doing it and allowing the player characters to have their own agency, their own decisions, and you still get to participate as the game master in that story and flesh that out. So yeah, I completely agree. And that's the thing I love about being a game master, and why I've done it for so long is, it's a collaborative storytelling event, and I'm going to be as much surprised as the players are. And I think that's a great session. I'm like, wow, I can't believe you did that. That's fantastic. Awesome.
I think that is the kind of one of the greatest things about running a game too, is that, kind of back in the day, if I would have prepped a lot, I had a tendency to railroad my players down kind of a set story. And not only does that make them upset, but I mean, I'm just doing the same thing that I've talked about all, or thought about for a month or some weeks or something. It's just if I let the players truly interact with some of the things that I'm putting out there, they just take the story in ways that I've just never imagined. And then all of a sudden I'm sitting at the table having as much fun wondering where the story is going to go than, as the players are themselves.
Last year at Gen Con, I ran a Star Wars game that I created called Operation Last Night, using Fantasy Flight game rules, but the adventure scenario. But I ran it multiple times, and every single time it was fun because they all started in the same position. They all had the same goal, because I was really explicit and clear on the goals that they needed to achieve. But they all approached it in very different ways. And it was a different story each time. And it was just so much fun to do that and kind of see how those different players take the same pre-gen characters even and end up in very different places with very different stories.
There's a famous quote that has been twisted into the role-playing game hobby that it says, no game master's plan ever survived contact with players. Right?
Exactly.
No, I think that is fascinating. Now, you just mentioned Fantasy Flight Star Wars. Do you really enjoy that system?
Oh, I love it. Yes, I absolutely love that system.
Yeah, I've got to play a few times, and I just thought it was absolutely great. I just thought it was great. Did you play the West End, the old 60s system?
Yes, I did. And that's actually a game I never game mastered because one of my good friends ran the Star Wars game. I ran Traveler, he ran Star Wars, and another friend ran Call of Cthulhu, our college years. And so I never game mastered the West End game Star Wars, so he did. So I played that one a lot, a bounty hunter. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, the narrative dice system that the new Star Wars system uses is just so interesting, and how it really tries to put into a mechanic the notion of narrative results. And I also think that the system is incredibly low prep for a game master. Mm-hmm. It's so easy to run a game in the Fantasy Flight setting.
Yeah, absolutely. And I totally agree about the narrative dice system. It's just, we were playing a few times, and it's just like the game master can just based on the dice, the game master can just ask the players, oh, well, what's the, what would be a disadvantage to you right now? And the player is just like, oh, well, this thing. I mean, the game master didn't even have to come up with that because the player knows what's going to either be a good advantage or a good disadvantage for them.
Players, as they start getting used to the system, start getting kind of really excited about it. Yes. When they get those advantage, or they get the triumph, or they get the despair, and they're like, oh no, what's the game master going to do to me now that I got that roll, that despair? And they particularly seem to get horrified when I say, I'm going to save that for a little bit later. Because you failed your hacking roll, and guess what? There are a squad of stormtroopers coming on, but you don't know that. So yeah, it really fosters that sort of collaborative storytelling. And one of the things I noticed is, because I think there's a tradition with game masters and referees, because it makes sense. Somebody says, oh, I got a hit, and I do this much damage, and then oftentimes the game master will describe that action. Oh, well, you take your flail and you smash him up against the shoulder, and it seems to bounce off of the ghoul's armor or whatever. That happens less in, I think, the Star Wars system, and they also use it for a couple of other things, but because you're really pushing it off. Okay, so you got a hit with some advantage. Tell me what happens. And they're the ones saying, oh, okay, well, so I take that flail, and they're the ones then describing the action of what their character does. And it's such a fascinating way to do it, and it works really well.
That was just kind of for our group as well. I kind of took a break from GMing, and a friend in our gaming group ran us through a short campaign. Just seeing some players, just like their confidence just growing as they were able just to make the calls about the advantages and things like that, and just seeing them too, just having all of us just being honest about when we got some disadvantages, what would be the worst thing for your character, and it was just like being honest about that and just being as creative as we can about some of the different roles. And it was just I don't know, it was just a great experience. So that is definitely a fun system. And actually just yesterday or the day before, I just got my Genesis book with the source book Shadow of the Beanstalk, because that is Fantasy Flight's generic system for the narrative dice system.
Yeah, actually, I've got a copy of both of those back here as well. So it's awesome. I love Shadow of the Beanstalk. That's the hacking rules that they have in there are a lot of fun, because it uses the same kind of rule set with the dice and that kind of stuff, and so it really encourages, even then in those cases where, because there's certain basically they call them ice. In the game, or icebreakers, so there's a firewall, and so it really encourages sort of like that envisioning. Wait, it's a wall of fire, and I'm the hacker, and you know what? This is how I appear in hacker mode, and I'm going to break down this firewall by it enters that sort of virtual reality kind of description that allows a lot of freedom and interpretation of what various software would look like if it were kind of had a physicality and was real.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. I'm looking forward to reading those here shortly. So that sounds fantastic. Before we move along and talk about your novels, what would you say to somebody who's maybe they've only played a role-playing game, a couple times, but they have this idea and they want to run a game, but they're kind of they're kind of holding back, about talking to their gaming group about running their campaign. What would you tell somebody who's in that situation?
I would say, well, one, I'd say go for it. Tell them, do it. And I would say it's not as hard as you think it is. And it gives you a chance to kind of really sort of have a world and a story that you get to put out and have people play and enjoy in. And don't worry about being 100% right with the rules, because we've discussed you're gonna make mistakes. There's going to be situations that are going to come up. It's not about being rules correct. It's about having fun and using the rules to sort of add some randomness and some structure, but just enjoy the fact that you get to put out your story and have players interact with kind of the world you're creating and have that experience. And you probably will be hooked. Once you do it, you'll get more comfortable and you'll want to do it more and more often.
Running so many games as the game master, it's just helped me become a better player as well. And so when I get the chances to play, I'm always trying to be an active player. I'm always looking for little things that will give the GM story hooks or little things that they can react on, because I know that's what I would want when I'm running a game. So I think running some games, even if you're not the forever GM or whatever, if you just even run, a few campaigns here or there, that it just really helps you in kind of the overall experience, even when you're playing.
Oh yeah, I can definitely see that. And because they're going to be able to help sort of provide those story hooks or flesh out some of the decisions that are being made and add to the story in interesting ways as a player because of that game mastering background. So I wholeheartedly endorse that. Sometimes
the regular GMs just need a break. So it is awesome to have somebody step up and volunteer to run even a one shot, let alone maybe even a short campaign that would last 6 or so sessions. It's always good to give a game master a break every once in a while if they've been doing it for a few years.
My brother is going to run his first game. He tells me he's really big into the Alien series, so he got the Alien RPG. Yeah. He's going to run me through it, so I'm going to try not to be a bad player for him on his first experience.
Yeah. Sometimes, sadly, sometimes game masters, while they're playing, want to try to take over the session. We just have to watch that sometimes.
That, and he's my younger brother. So
that always adds to it. All right. Well, we've been talking about role-playing games a lot, but you do have another kind of facet here, that you're a novelist as well. Could you kind of tell us about your novels?
So I've written a trilogy of mystery novels and then a standalone. It's the Drexel Pierce mystery series. And fun fact, Drexel Pierce was my Star Wars West End Games bounty hunter character's name.
Awesome.
Who share some similarities. But it's modern day, based in Chicago, police procedural, noirish bit, kind of hard-boiled feel to it. And the trilogy has kind of an overarching storyline. And then each of the 3 novels has its own sort of mystery. The first one being a story about a politician who is killed, and my detective who works for the Chicago police tries to figure it out. So it's pretty straightforward in that sense. That book is The Shattered Bowl, is the first in that series. And then the second one is called Kill Them All, and it deals with a serial killer on the loose in Chicago. And then the final one in the trilogy is Justice in Slow Motion, which deals with the body that is found in kind of interesting circumstances, and also concludes sort of the overarching piece. So those 3 novels together, and Drexel Pierce is the Chicago detective, and he has a few other compatriots that show up in each of the novels as supporting cast. And then I have another novel called The Clearing, which is based in the late 1970s, sort of near the Canadian border, and has sort of a Cold War vibe to it. It deals with a small town Vietnam veteran detective who learns about a body in the cold winter forest and not too far from the border with Canada, and learns some darker truths that he wasn't interested in finding about his town. So they are, like I said, contemporary mysteries that feature detectives who hopefully people would want pursuing cases if they needed them, because they are tenacious and want to get at the truth no matter what the cost.
I guess I do have to ask, do all game masters really just want to be novelists? Or do all novelists just want to run games? I don't know.
It's probably both. I mean, I don't know, because I was writing as long as I can remember stories and whatnot. I think that's always what I found so fun about game mastery. It's a real creative outlet and it's a slightly different sort of take on it. So yeah, I don't know, maybe both. I mean, it's you can put a lot of work into crafting either set of stories and coming out on the other side with hopefully something that's really satisfactory to either your players or your readers.
There's just something about the whole storytelling aspect. If you love stories, why not be a game master? If you love stories, why not write a novel?
Yeah. Have you written a novel?
No, it's I have ideas. I have a lot of ideas. I usually regale my wife with them, and she tells me to get back to writing the role-playing game books because that's what makes money. So it's on the list here. Actually, if I had to kind of reorganize some things because of the pandemic. Actually, I was supposed to, I had it scheduled to start writing kind of outlines and start writing my first novel here at the beginning of April, but I've had to change all my plans because of the pandemic and that, and had to switch my focus back to some role-playing game stuff because of kind of just the changing market and things like that. So I guess I put it off just a little bit longer, but yeah, one day I will write at least one, but I think I just started a little list recently. I think I have 17 ideas.
Oh, fantastic.
So so one day here, but I just got to get through a few other projects, and then I'm going to put it right back on the schedule and see if I can knock something out here. And kind of speaking of that, since I do write RPG resource books and that, which are all self-published. I noticed that your novels were self-published. Some authors are kind of sensitive about that. So I wanted to ask you about that process. What do you think about self-publishing?
I think it's a fantastic opportunity, right? It's when I was growing up and writing, there was one way that you got published, and you had to write something, you had to find an agent, and then they had to go and take that to a publisher and try to sell it that way. And it didn't matter, and sometimes it really wasn't a matter of how good of a writer you were or not, how good of your ideas were or not. It was really about what the publisher thought would sell, right? Yeah. And they're people, they make mistakes, and they're also trying to make guesses. What self-publishing has done, and with the modern technology and that's available, is just open up the door for people to put out their ideas. And, some of them are not very good, but some of them are really good. And I think the notion of allowing people a fairly low level of entry to publish their creative ideas. I mean, just to be creative and just put it out there is mind blowing. It's just, I can't think of any reason why you wouldn't want to have those opportunities available. And I tried doing some of the agent stuff, and there was some interest, but no one bought it, and that's fine. That they have to make those business decisions. Mm-hmm. And I decided, I love the story. I enjoy it. I think it's good. And I'm just going to put it out there. Mm-hmm. I forget about it. I want it out there, and I think it's good. And so I did. And I really encourage anyone to kind of follow that path. It's not necessarily an easy one. And I'm sure how much kind of marketing you have to do if you really want to make it successful. It's you kind of take on all the roles: editor, publisher, marketer, designer, accountant. You take on everything, but there's a huge amount of satisfaction in that as well. So
I absolutely agree. And I think I hear a lot kind of the quality question kind of always comes up. Oh, well, there's no kind of gatekeeper to make sure, something's not good or something that's published. I think that question should, just always be left up to the audience. There's things, if it's not any good, it'll kind of sort itself out. Why not let the audience decide? And I know when I interviewed Matt Forbeck, who does a ton of RPG writing, but he is also a New York Times bestselling novelist, he was saying that it's his opinion that the whole genre of lit RPG wouldn't have been created by a publishing company. Because that it came about through people who self-publish, because publishing companies wouldn't be thinking about people enjoying reading a book about being inside of a game or something like that. And I thought that was an interesting thought that he had on that. And I mean, it does come down to something I think that is fundamental for me. It's just like, if I'm doing the best job I can, why should somebody tell me I can't do that? Right?
Yeah, well, exactly. I mean, yeah, that's how I felt. Like, well, okay, so publishers X, Y, and Z didn't like my Shattered Bull book, or it's not even they didn't like it; they just didn't think they could sell it. That's what it boiled down to.
Yeah,
it wasn't even a judgment on the quality. And I wanted to get it out. And, I've not made hand over fist selling the Shattered Bull online, but I know people have read it. I've seen people say good things about it. I've ignored some of the people that have said bad things about it, because you know what? People are going to like it. Some people are going to like it. Some people aren't. And I just try to focus on the positive. And you know what? People have said they liked it overall. More people seem to like it than not. And hey, there are more people reading my book now than if I had stuck with the traditional path, and which it would be sitting in a drawer doing nothing, having me and my wife and a few other people have read it.
Just being able to put something out is just such such an incredible feeling, to be able to, to hold something in your hands that you have created, and then to let normal people react to it. And if a book needs improvement, hey, improve it. Maybe people will like it though, and I just don't see, really any of the logic in, like you were just saying, like just keeping a novel that that you put your heart and soul in, just keeping it in a drawer because somebody's like, actually, it's well written, but that's just not the market right now that we're serving, or something like that. Just for that to be the decision for your novel just to sit in a drawer or something like that is just very frustrating to me.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree with what Matt said. Like there are genres there that would never have been created, or we're over the zombie thing. We don't want any more zombie books. Well, maybe your zombie book is going to be really fantastic, and people are going to want to read it. Yeah. And I don't see why having more creativity out there is a bad thing. And it's just
absolutely.
It's fantastic. It's art. It's fantastic.
Yeah, I completely agree. And who's to say, of course, some of the publishing companies and stuff that are very huge have to make different kind of calculations. Maybe somebody writes their zombie book, even though zombies aren't the most popular genre right now. There are still people who want zombie fiction, and it might not be enough to keep a huge, publisher interested, but it would be certainly enough for an individual or a family to say, oh, I'm making some money off of a zombie book that a publisher said, oh, well, they're not super hot right now, so we couldn't move this many copies. But, selling a few copies to people who really love the genre can be very rewarding on a number of levels.
Absolutely.
And then, as you did mention, I do try to tell people, I encourage everybody, if they have been thinking about, writing a novel or writing a role-playing game or something like that for, years, usually, if they've been thinking about it for years or decades, you just need to do it at some point, and do it before it's too late. And
yes.
we have every tool and thing at our disposal right now, but and there are challenges, and it's not necessarily easy, but we have everything at our disposal nowadays that somebody didn't have even 10 to 15 years ago, that you don't have to buy $8,000 worth of your books, to try to sell them to somebody with print on demand and everything like that. It's the barrier to entry is really low.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's sort of like game mastering, right? Like, It's not as hard as what people think. It's not without its challenges, but
sure,
it's not as hard as what people think it is. the way the technology moved and just opened that up is so fast is I think it is really spectacular and does just allow people to pursue that opportunity if they want to. And I agree with you. I very much encourage it. Kind of no reason not to. If you're really passionate, and like you said, if you've had this for a number of years, you're passionate about it. So here's your opportunity to get it out.
Like we said, it has challenges. So I usually try to let people know that, writing the book, designing the book, publishing the book is 20% of the work. 80% is marketing.
Yes.
I also do try to tell people as well that publishing companies nowadays are looking to see if you've self-published already. They want to see what you're capable of doing before they take a risk on you. And so self-publishing something is actually perfect because they can look at that and say, oh, wow, this person writes in this exact style we want. Here's a project for you. Or do you have something else that's laying around? Can we publish it? And so getting your name out there, getting your work out there is really never a bad thing.
Yeah, you're right. They're not fools. They're like, wait, these people are writing stuff that is doing well and they fit our market. Yeah, it's become a way for them to scout talent that they might want to scoop up.
Well, Patrick, we've been talking for a long time. Where can people find you online and learn more about your books and things like that?
Yeah, so I have a website, patrickkanouse.com, that has sample chapters and links to my books that people can go to. I'm on Facebook and Twitter at Patrick Kanouse. I don't hide behind those things, behind a different name. So it's got my name, and you can find me on the interwebs. So,
all right. And then I will provide links to your website and to your books in the show notes for this episode at dicegeeks.com. So anybody who's listening can just hop over to dicegeeks.com and check out those links in the show notes. Well, Patrick, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure, and it's been a lot of fun talking to you.
All right, there you have it, guys. I really hope you enjoyed my conversation with Patrick today. As I mentioned, I have provided links to his novels in the show notes of this episode at dicegeeks.com. Head over there, check those out. Now, hey guys, if you want some free stuff, head over to dicegeeks.com/free. You'll get 10 free dungeon maps. You'll never miss an episode of this show. And each and every Friday, you'll get a little update of what I am working on. You don't want to miss that, do you? All right, guys. Also, if you like this show, please consider supporting it in some way. You can tell a friend. You can leave a review. You can subscribe. You can also support the show financially at patreon.com/dicegeeks. Every bit of support on Patreon just lets me know that I should continue making this show each and every Wednesday. I thank you so much for listening. And until next Wednesday, keep gaming.